A UFO abducted a boy and took him to a distant planet. After years, the child returned to Earth with new knowledge and realized that the world had changed dramatically.
There he is.
Wow! How did you do that?
The movie's action kicks off on July 4, 1978, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the Frisbee Dog Championship. 12-year-old David Freeman quarrels with his 8-year-old brother Jeff, who laughs at David's dog Bruiser for not winning the competition. The boy's parents, Helen and Bill, try to reconcile them, but they continue to insult each other. The Freeman family returns home, leaving Jeff to play with his friends. As evening falls, Helen asks David to pick up his brother since he's too young to go through the woods alone. Reluctant, David refuses, but his mother assures him it won't take long. She promises that once the whole family is together, they'll go out for dinner and watch fireworks. David reluctantly agrees and, with Bruiser, goes to get Jeff. In the woods, the excited dog starts behaving strangely, and soon David notices a mysterious glow through the trees. The boy continues deeper into the forest, and suddenly, Jeff jumps down from a tree, startling David. Irritated, David brushes off his brother and follows Bruiser, who is anxiously barking at the edge of a ravine. David peers into the darkness when suddenly, the boy loses consciousness but soon wakes up, climbs out of the ravine, and heads home. However, at the doorstep, he is greeted by a completely unfamiliar woman. Perplexed, David claims he lives here, but the woman doesn't take him seriously. David bursts into the house and calls for his parents, only to find another stranger. Assuming the child is lost, the couple decides to call the police, and soon David is taken to the station. After some time, officers discover an old case of a missing 12-year-old boy who suspiciously resembles David. During questioning, the boy insists it's July 1978, which genuinely disturbs the police. The officers, along with David, visit the new Freeman family home to clarify details of the child's disappearance. Suddenly, the boy sees his parents at the door and runs toward the house, only to find that they have changed significantly. Helen and Bill joyfully embrace their son, and he loses consciousness in their arms. Meanwhile, in the town, the police discover a UFO crashed into a power line support. They call in Dr. Faraday from NASA, and what the researcher sees astonishes him. David wakes up in the hospital. His father asks where he's been for so long, but the boy confidently claims that after meeting Jeff, he immediately came home. Suddenly, the older Jeff enters the room, but David can't believe his eyes. The parents leave them alone, and Jeff apologizes for scaring him in the woods, confessing that he blamed himself for his disappearance. Jeff talks about his search and reveals that their parents continued to believe in a miracle. He also states that it's now 1986, meaning 8 years have passed since that night in the woods. Later, the parents return to the room and inform David that he'll have to stay in the hospital for a couple more days as doctors want to thoroughly examine him. One night, David suddenly wakes up and tells his brother that a voice in his head is calling him. Jeff tries to reassure him, saying it's just a dream. The next day, an alien spacecraft is directed to NASA's base. Specialists discover that the flying spaceship's shell is seamless, making it challenging to access inside. Meanwhile, scientists examine David's brain activity and soon notice that the boy's brain is transmitting a massive amount of information to the computer in binary code, then translating the blueprints of the flying spaceship. The inexplicable research results are sent to NASA, and Dr. Faraday immediately approaches the Freemans, asking to take the boy for further examination. Bill refuses to make his son a guinea pig, but Faraday persists.
Well, I'm sorry you don't want to know the truth.
He then turns to David and asks if he wants to find out where he has been, why he remembers nothing, and why he hasn't changed at all, offering to spend just 48 hours at NASA's research center. After a few seconds of contemplation, David agrees. He is brought to the base and accommodated in a room filled with toys. Then, an intern named Carolyn McAdams comes in and shows him a robot that delivers food and various items. David wonders why they don't show his favorite program on TV, but Carolyn says it's been off the air for a long time. He also sees music videos for the first time, surprising Carolyn because she has no idea what happened to him.
Gone where? Outer space? Could be.
The girl then asks what happened to him, but David, confused, remarks that he doesn't remember anything. Worried that she's prying too much, Carolyn quickly changes the subject, promises to bring him something tasty for breakfast, and leaves. The next day, Dr. Faraday allows David to call home to assure his family that he's okay. Then, Faraday and his assistants begin new examinations of the boy, connecting special sensors to his head. The doctor asks what happened to him after falling into the ravine, and suddenly all the computers start malfunctioning due to an enormous amount of information. However, David remembers nothing. Then Faraday's colleague asks David to say his name, and the computer responds faster than the boy can speak. Astonished by what's happening, the researchers again ask him where he has been for the last 8 years. Irritated, David repeats that he doesn't remember, but his brain thinks otherwise. On the screen, information appears that the boy was on the distant planet Phalan, located 560 light-years away from Earth. Scientists continue to ask questions and find out that the boy traveled faster than light. David spent less than 5 hours on the journey, but 8 years passed on Earth during that time. Shocked, Faraday asks David where Phalan is, and the boy's brain immediately provides a star map.
My God, these are uncharted systems.
The boy watches in fear as this unfolds, then tears off the sensors and escapes. Faraday realizes that the boy will have to stay with them much longer than originally anticipated. In the evening, Carolyn visits David again with a food-carrying robot. David admits he doesn't like it here, but then comforts himself with the thought that he'll be back home tomorrow. However, Carolyn accidentally reveals that they'll keep the boy at the center for at least 5 more days. David panics, but then, unnoticed by the guards watching him, he asks the girl to help him escape. At night, David is again awakened by the calling voice in his head. Then, a robot sent by Carolyn arrives in the room and transports him to a hangar where the mysterious flying spaceship is located. Approaching it, suddenly, an entrance appears in the seamless shell with stairs leading to him. The amazed boy cautiously enters, and then the ship's computer speaks to him. David realizes that it's the same voice that has been calling him all this time. The mysterious voice names the boy the navigator and reveals that his brain holds star maps without which he cannot return to his planet. Suddenly, the security notices an entrance in the impenetrable ship and sounds the alarm. Dozens of armed NASA personnel, along with Faraday, storm into the hangar.
You wish to depart hostile alien environment?
Yes!
Then the ship breaks free from its restraints, opens the gates, and prepares to return to Phalan, but the boy stops it and asks to be taken home. However, the computer doesn't know the route and awaits David's instructions. Stunned, the boy suggests flying about 20 miles away from the base, but the computer interprets it differently, and they sharply ascend in front of the astonished onlookers. Faraday suggests returning to the communication room, where they can track the ship's movements. David commands the computer to return to Earth and fly 20 miles forward, not upward. They come to a stop, and David finally inquires why he came to Earth. The ship's computer was collecting biological specimens for analysis on Phalan and it accidentally chose David. The computer also reveals that, according to Phalan's inhabitants' hypothesis, humans only use 10% of their brains. To test this, it embedded all its star maps into the boy's brain but soon encountered a high-voltage power line and lost all the data. So now, without David's help, the ship cannot complete its mission and return home. Angry that the ship took him away from home for 8 years, the boy demands to be returned, if not to the past, at least to his home. Suddenly, NASA helicopters appear above them, and the computer promises to take the boy anywhere as soon as it regains access to its maps. They set off on their journey, disappearing from the scientist's view without a trace. Finally, David asks the robot what to call him, and it introduces itself as Trimaction Drone Ship.
Okay, I'll call you Max. It's easier.
Max?
Right.
Then the boy suggests hiding somewhere from NASA employees, and Max immediately dives into the sea, shocking David. Once in safety, Max decides to focus on extracting information from the boy's brain. He opens one of the ship's compartments, where David sees numerous creatures from different planets. Among the terrifying and aggressive beings, David discovers the harmless Puckmaren from the planet Binpuka Minor, which was destroyed in a collision with a comet. The boy then asks Max to take him home. Meanwhile, at NASA, radars stop detecting the ship.
It's wonderful. Just lost 2 of the most important discoveries of the 20th century.
Suddenly, David's father calls Faraday to inquire about his son's well-being, but the doctor doesn't admit that the boy is missing. Finally, Max retrieves all the necessary information from David's brain, along with various useless details, and starts behaving like a human. David and Max begin to argue about who is smarter, and the offended robot, raising the ship to a height, suggests that the boy figure out how to control it himself. While David nervously looks for levers, the ship goes into free fall. Faraday, once again monitoring the ship, notices that it has lost control and is about to crash. Fortunately, David presses the right button in time, and the ship immediately ascends. David continues to pilot the ship and realizes that it's not as difficult as he thought. Meanwhile, Carolyn goes to the Freeman family and tells them that David flew away on an alien ship. However, she is immediately found by NASA employees and taken to the center, demanding that she tell the truth about David's escape. Soon, David and Max unexpectedly find themselves in Tokyo, where enthusiastic crowds capture them on film, and a few minutes later, they fly over San Francisco. However, after some time, David and Max realize that they are lost somewhere in Texas. They descend and ask a passing company how to get to his hometown of Fort Lauderdale, but the young people drive away in fear. Then Max wonders about the sounds he heard from the people in the car. David explains that it's music, and Max declares that he wants to hear something similar. The boy suggests picking up one of the similar radio waves. Meanwhile, on every news channel, they talk about the amazing UFO, and researchers see that it is finally returning to Florida. David asks Max to stop at the nearest gas station to call home, and local residents stare in astonishment at the flying spaceship. Jeff picks up the phone and warns that their home is full of NASA employees. David informs him that he is already close and asks his brother to explain where their new home is. However, the landmarks don't help, and David suggests sending him some signal that will be visible from above. Jeff promises to come up with something and hangs up. Then they continue their journey, and soon they approach Fort Lauderdale. Jeff climbs onto the roof of the house and launches fireworks, which David and Max immediately notice. Realizing that they are already home, the boy bids farewell to the robot and admits that he was very glad to spend time with him. Happy, David plans to tell his friends about his adventures, but he immediately remembers that they have all grown up, and he has not. Max says he would gladly return him 8 years ago, but it's too dangerous. The ship approaches the Freeman family's home, but then David, in horror, notices numerous NASA vehicles and realizes that they won't leave him alone. Max opens the exit, and David steps outside, but upon seeing the frantic researchers, security, and police, he understands that he won't be able to lead a regular life.
I'm sorry. I don't belong here now. I love you.
Having said goodbye to his parents, David returns to the spaceship and asks Max to try to send him back to the past, despite the risks of vaporization. Max warns that he may not survive and could turn to dust, but the boy says he has no other choice, as otherwise people from NASA will mock him for the rest of his life. David and Max bid farewell again, thanking each other for everything, and embark on the risky time travel. A moment later, David wakes up in the same ravine where he fell in 1978, and he rushes home. Finally, he reunites with his family, who had been waiting for him. The Freemans leave the pier, heading to dinner, and David suddenly confesses to his parents, the dog, and even his annoying brother that he loves them. While Helen and Bill decide which restaurant to go to, Puckmaran peeks out of David's backpack. Jeff notices the extraterrestrial creature, but David asks to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, Independence Day celebrations continue, and suddenly during the fireworks, David sees Max in the sky signaling to him, and then flying back to Falon. What would you do in David's place? Stay in the future or return to your familiar life? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.